The wounded heart that chooses to heal. Wisdom from Solomon. True love is tested when it is wounded and still chooses to heal. In the courts of ancient Jerusalem, where King Solomon rendered judgment with wisdom that became legendary across nations, there echoed a profound understanding of the human heart that transcends millennia. The king who spoke with divine insight about the nature of love, loss, and redemption left us teachings that illuminate the deepest truth about authentic love. It is not measured by its capacity to avoid pain, but by its choice to heal, despite being wounded. The foundation of Solomonic wisdom on love. Solomon, the wisest of all kings, understood that love exists not in the absence of trial, but in its response to adversity. His writings reveal a man who had experienced the full spectrum of human emotion and relationship, from the passionate heights described in the Song of Songs, to the sobering reflections on life's vanity in Ecclesiastes. Through his proverbs, prayers, and personal revelations, we find a consistent thread. True love is distinguished not by its perfection, but by its persistence through imperfection. When Solomon declared that love covers all sins, he was not speaking of blind acceptance or willful ignorance of wrongdoing. Rather, he articulated the transformative power of a love that sees clearly, acknowledges pain, and yet chooses the harder path of healing over the easier route of abandonment. This principle forms the cornerstone of understanding what it means for wounded love to choose healing. The king's most famous judgment, involving two women claiming the same child, reveals the essence of this teaching. True love was identified not by its claim to possession, but by its willingness to sacrifice for the beloved's well-being. The real mother chose potential loss over certain harm to her child. Similarly, true love in relationships chooses the difficult work of healing over the finality of severing bonds. The seasons of love and healing. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon teaches us that to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. Among these seasons, he specifically mentions a time to heal, and a time to love. The profound wisdom here lies in understanding that these seasons often coincide, that the time for love is frequently also the time for healing, and that love's truest expression may be found precisely in its healing capacity. The wounded heart stands at a crossroads that Solomon knew well. There is a time to mourn what has been lost or damaged, a time to acknowledge the depth of the injury, and a time to feel the full weight of betrayal, disappointment, or misunderstanding. But Solomon's wisdom teaches us that dwelling eternally in these seasons leads only to the vanity and meaninglessness he so eloquently described in his later writings. The choice to heal represents a conscious decision to move from one season to another, not by denying the reality of the wound, but by refusing to let the wound define the relationship's future. This transition requires the kind of wisdom Solomon prized above all earthly treasures, the ability to see beyond immediate circumstances to eternal principles, to value relationships over pride, and to choose hope over despair. Love that chooses to heal acknowledges that wounds are inevitable in any meaningful relationship. The deeper the love, the greater the capacity for hurt, because vulnerability increases with intimacy. Solomon understood this paradox intimately, writing in Proverbs that faithful are the wounds of a friend, recognizing that even necessary hurts can come from places of love. The alchemy of forgiveness. Central to Solomon's teaching on love's healing power is the concept of forgiveness, not as a single act but as a continuous choice that transforms both the forgiver and the forgiven. The king, who had to manage complex relationships with hundreds of wives, difficult political alliances, and the inevitable conflicts that arise in human governance, understood forgiveness as both a practical necessity and a spiritual discipline. When love chooses to heal, it engages in a kind of spiritual alchemy, transforming the base metal of hurt into the gold of renewed connection. This process, Solomon teaches us, begins with wisdom. Proverbs tells us that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, and in the context of healing love, this means recognizing that our capacity to heal and be healed comes from a source beyond our own understanding or strength. The wounded heart that chooses healing must first choose wisdom. This means acknowledging the reality of the wound without minimizing its impact, understanding the circumstances that led to the injury without excusing harmful behavior, and recognizing one's own role in the relationship's dynamics without accepting inappropriate blame. Solomon's wisdom teaches that healing love requires clear sight, not rose-colored glasses. Forgiveness, in Solomon's understanding, is not the absence of consequences but the presence of hope. It does not mean that trust is immediately restored, or that boundaries become unnecessary. Rather, it means that the future is not held hostage by the past, that growth is possible, and that the relationship's potential for good has not been permanently destroyed by its experience of harm. The courage to remain vulnerable. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of love that chooses to heal is the requirement to remain vulnerable despite having been wounded. Solomon, who wrote extensively about the strength found in wisdom, understood that true strength sometimes manifests as the courage to stay open when every instinct calls for protective closure. The wounded heart naturally seeks to protect itself through walls, distance, and emotional withdrawal. These are normal, and often initially necessary responses to injury. However, Solomon's wisdom suggests that healing cannot occur behind permanent walls. The very vulnerability that made the wound possible is also necessary for its healing. This does not mean reckless exposure to repeated harm. Solomon was clear about the importance of wisdom in relationships, writing that the simple believes every word, but the prudent considers well his steps. Choosing to heal while remaining vulnerable requires discernment about when, how, and to what degree openness is wise. The courage to remain vulnerable in a wounded relationship often requires faith that transcends immediate evidence. It requires believing in the possibility of change, in the power of love to transform, and in the value of the relationship despite its current brokenness. Solomon understood this kind of faith, writing in Ecclesiastes about the mystery of life and love that often defies immediate comprehension. The patience of healing love. Solomon's teachings emphasize that healing is a process, not an event. Just as physical wounds require time to mend, and often leave scars that tell the story of survival and recovery, emotional and relational wounds heal according to their own timeline, which cannot be rushed without risking incomplete healing or re-injury. Love that chooses to heal must embrace patience, both with the process and with the wounded party. This patience extends in multiple directions: patience with oneself, as one works through complex emotions; patience with the other person as they potentially struggle with guilt, shame, or their own defensive reactions; and patience with the relationship as it slowly rebuilds trust and intimacy. The king, who observed that there is a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, understood that healing love sometimes requires the patience of a gardener. Seeds of renewed trust and deeper understanding are planted in the soil of forgiveness and watered with consistent loving actions, but their growth cannot be forced. The gardener's role is to provide proper conditions and then wait with hope. Solomon's patience was not passive acceptance, but active hope. He teaches that those who love wisely understand that setbacks are part of the healing process, that progress may be slow and sometimes imperceptible, and that the goal is not to return to exactly what was before, but to build something new and potentially stronger from the foundation of shared experience and mutual commitment to growth. The transformation of suffering. One of Solomon's most profound insights concerns the potential for suffering to become a catalyst for deeper love rather than its destroyer. The king, who experienced both the heights of earthly success and the depths of spiritual questioning, understood that pain could serve a redemptive purpose when approached with wisdom. When love chooses to heal, it transforms the meaning of the wound. Instead of allowing the injury to become a permanent barrier or a weapon for future conflicts, healing love reframes the wound as an opportunity for deeper understanding, greater empathy, and stronger commitment. This transformation doesn't minimize the reality of the pain, but changes its purpose from destruction to construction. Solomon's writings suggest that some of love's most beautiful expressions emerge from its response to difficulty. The love that has been tested by betrayal and chosen forgiveness often develops a depth and resilience that untested love lacks. The heart that has been broken and mended may beat with greater appreciation for the precious nature of trust and intimacy. This transformation requires seeing with the eyes of wisdom rather than just the eyes of hurt. Solomon teaches that wisdom allows us to see the bigger picture, to understand that temporary setbacks need not define permanent outcomes, and to recognize that growth often emerges from challenge in ways that comfort and ease cannot provide. The wisdom of boundaries in healing. While Solomon championed the healing power of love, his practical wisdom also recognized the importance of boundaries in the healing process. Love that chooses to heal is not love that chooses to be foolish or to enable destructive patterns. The same wisdom that calls for forgiveness also calls for discernment about how that forgiveness is expressed. Healing love establishes boundaries not as walls to keep love out, but as garden fences that protect the space where love can grow. These boundaries might include requirements for changed behavior, consequences for repeated harmful actions, or agreements about communication and interaction that support the healing process rather than hinder it. Solomon understood that true love sometimes says no in order to ultimately say yes to something better. The parent who disciplines a child, the friend who refuses to enable destructive behavior, or the spouse who insists on counseling before attempting reconciliation, all demonstrate love that chooses the harder path of healing over the easier path of superficial peace. The establishment of healthy boundaries in the context of healing love requires great wisdom because it must balance firmness with compassion, protection with openness, and consequences with grace. Solomon's approach to justice in his kingdom provides a model. He sought solutions that protected the innocent while providing opportunity for the guilty to reform and restore their place in the community of healing. Solomon's wisdom recognizes that healing love rarely occurs in isolation. The king who built a great kingdom understood the importance of community in supporting individual growth and relationship healing. When love chooses to heal, it often requires the support, wisdom, and accountability that can only come from trusted community. The wounded heart may initially want to hide, to process its pain in isolation, or to involve others only as advocates for its position. However, Solomon's teachings suggest that true healing benefits from the counsel of multiple perspectives, the support of committed friends, and the accountability that community provides. This community involvement must be chosen wisely. Solomon wrote extensively about the importance of choosing advisors and friends carefully, recognizing that some counsel leads to life while other counsel leads to destruction. The healing process requires people who can speak truth in love, who can provide both comfort and challenge, and who are committed to the success of the relationship rather than the vindication of any particular party. The role of community in healing love includes providing perspective when emotions cloud judgment, offering practical support during difficult seasons, modeling healthy relationships, and celebrating progress when it occurs. Solomon understood that isolated individuals are more vulnerable to both deception and despair, while those surrounded by wisdom and love have resources to draw upon that exceed their own understanding and strength. The generational impact of healing love. Solomon's wisdom extended beyond immediate circumstances to consider the long-term and generational impact of our choices. The king, who was tasked with building upon his father David's legacy, understood that our responses to relationship wounds affect not only ourselves and our immediate relationships, but also those who look to us for examples of how love and conflict should be navigated. When love chooses to heal, it creates a legacy that extends far beyond the immediate relationship. Children observe how their parents handle conflict and forgiveness. Friends watch how we respond to betrayal and disappointment, and colleagues see how we navigate professional relationships through difficult seasons. Each choice to heal rather than harbor bitterness contributes to a culture of redemption rather than retribution. Solomon's own complex family history, including his father's adultery and its consequences, his brother's rebellion, and his own struggles with relationships, demonstrates both the challenges and the possibilities inherent in choosing healing love across generations. The patterns we establish in our own relationships become the inheritance we leave to those who follow us. The generational perspective also provides motivation for the difficult work of healing. When we understand that our choice to forgive, to rebuild trust, and to model redemptive love impacts not only our immediate happiness, but also the emotional and relational health of future generations, the stakes become higher and the effort more worthwhile. The spiritual dimension of healing love, throughout Solomon's teachings, runs a consistent thread connecting human love and divine love, suggesting that our capacity to choose healing over harboring resentment reflects something fundamental about the nature of reality itself. The king who built the temple, and dedicated it as a place where people could come for forgiveness and restoration, understood that human love's healing power mirrors divine love's redemptive nature. When love chooses to heal, it participates in something larger than itself. Solomon's writings suggest that forgiveness and restoration are not merely human achievements, but reflections of divine character. This understanding provides both the motivation and the power necessary for the difficult work of healing wounded relationships. The spiritual dimension of healing love also provides hope beyond human capacity. Solomon, despite his great wisdom, acknowledged the limitations of human understanding and the need for divine assistance in navigating life's complexities. The choice to heal often requires resources beyond our natural inclinations or abilities, drawing upon faith, hope, and love that transcend immediate circumstances. Prayer, meditation, and spiritual discipline play crucial roles in maintaining the choice to heal when emotions and circumstances argue for abandonment. Solomon's own prayers, recorded in the biblical account of the temple dedication, demonstrate his understanding that lasting change in human relationships requires divine intervention and blessing. The economics of love and healing. Solomon, known for his wisdom in governance and economics, understood that relationships operate according to certain economic principles. Love that chooses to heal requires investment without guarantee of return, demonstrates faith in future possibilities despite current evidence, and often involves short-term cost for long-term benefit. The immediate cost of choosing to heal includes the emotional energy required for forgiveness, the vulnerability necessary for renewed trust, the time needed for rebuilding what has been damaged, and often the swallowing of pride that prevents defensive responses. These costs are real and significant, and Solomon's wisdom doesn't minimize them. However, the economic analysis must also consider the cost of not healing, the emotional price of carrying bitterness, the relational poverty that results from closed hearts, the lost opportunities for deeper intimacy and understanding, and the compound interest of unresolved conflict that affects all future interactions. Solomon's wisdom suggests that love operates on different economic principles than mere transaction. While human nature calculates costs and benefits, love's economy includes factors that transcend immediate calculation: the intrinsic value of relationship, the potential for transformation, the compound interest of forgiveness, and the long-term returns of invested grace. The art of renewal. The choice to heal wounded love is ultimately an artistic endeavor, requiring creativity, vision, and the ability to see beauty where others see only brokenness. Solomon, who appreciated beauty in all its forms and created works of lasting aesthetic value, understood that relationship renewal requires the heart of an artist combined with the mind of a wise strategist. Healing love doesn't simply repair what was broken, but often creates something new and potentially more beautiful than what existed before. Like a Japanese art form that highlights the cracks in broken pottery with gold, healing love can transform the places of previous wounding into sources of unique strength and beauty.
This artistic dimension of healing requires imagination to envision possibilities beyond current circumstances, creativity to find new ways of connecting and communicating, and the patience of an artist who understands that masterpieces require time and careful attention to detail. The art of renewal also requires appreciation for the process itself, not just the final outcome. Solomon teaches that there is meaning and beauty in the work of healing, in the daily choice to love despite difficulty, and in the gradual transformation that occurs when love consistently chooses hope over despair. The legacy of wounded love that heals. In the end, Solomon's wisdom teaches us that the choice between healing and harboring resentment is one of the most defining decisions we make in life. It shapes our character, determines the quality of our relationships, affects our emotional and spiritual health, and influences the legacy we leave behind. The wounded heart that chooses to heal becomes a testament to love's true power. It demonstrates that love is not merely an emotion or feeling, but a choice, a commitment, and a force capable of transformation even in the most difficult circumstances. This choice separates authentic love from its counterfeits, mature love from its immature versions, and lasting love from its temporary alternatives. Solomon's own life, with its triumphs and failures, its wisdom and folly, its moments of spiritual insight and seasons of spiritual darkness, illustrates both the possibility and the challenge of living out these principles. His teachings emerge not from theoretical knowledge, but from the lived experience of one who had loved deeply, been wounded significantly, and chosen wisdom over bitterness in most circumstances. The practical application of Solomon's wisdom about healing love requires daily choices that compound over time into either patterns of grace or patterns of resentment. Each moment when we choose understanding over judgment, forgiveness over revenge, hope over despair, and love over fear contributes to the larger story of who we become and what kind of world we create around us. As we face our own wounded relationships and consider whether to choose healing or harboring hurt, Solomon's wisdom reminds us that true love's greatest test is not its ability to avoid wounding, but its choice to heal despite being wounded. In making this choice, we participate in love's most transformative power and contribute to its most lasting legacy. The echo of Solomon's wisdom continues to resonate across the centuries because it speaks to the timeless human experience of love, loss, and the possibility of redemption. In choosing to heal wounded love, we align ourselves with forces of creation rather than destruction, hope rather than despair, and light rather than darkness. This is perhaps the greatest wisdom of all, that love's choice to heal transforms not only relationships, but the very hearts that make such choices, creating ripples of redemption that extend far beyond our immediate understanding or control. True love is tested when it is wounded, and still chooses to heal. In these words we find not only a description of love's greatest challenge, but also its most beautiful possibility.